Hello, this is Spink. I'm going to do a Let's Play of AGEOD's Civil War 2. It's a historical strategy game of the Civil War, obviously. This is the first Let's Play I've done. It's actually my first video, so I'm sure it's going to be a little rough, and there'll be technical difficulties, and etc. You're just going to have to bear with me on that. I like to play from the July 1861 start rather than the earlier start here, the April start. So I'm going to play as Lincoln. We'll start that up. The first thing I'd like to talk about is how kind of my philosophy on playing these kinds of games, because I think it is pertinent to how this will go, and kind of the understanding of why I do the things that I do. I try not to use 2020 hindsight, because we know how everything turned out. We know the mistakes were made. We know how the Union floundered until they found the right recipe for victory. And using that information, we could start with that from the beginning. And I just think that is not going to give a historical feel that I'm looking for. I'm not necessarily looking to win the game here. I'm looking to have an experience, an enjoyable experience that has the feel of being involved in this situation. So that's kind of where I start from. I don't do min-maxing. I don't try to find the optimal force mix or strategies or etc. So, excuse me. That's my basic philosophy on how I do this stuff. And with that in mind, there's certain game options that I choose to that ties in with that. The biggie here, there's a few biggies, is the historical attrition. The standard rule for attrition, or the standard setting here, is you do not take attrition. You do not take losses for non-moving forces. 2/3 to 3/4 of the deaths in the Civil War were due to non-combat reasons. They were due to sickness and stuff like that. So to get a historical feel, I want to have a lot of attrition due to those things. And that's the second option here. So non-moving forces, we're going to have to pay very careful attention to the weather, to supply, to providing proper shelter for them in the winter. Pay attention to the harsh weather. Make sure we're not pushing forward in blizzards and whatnot. So I like that. And also I like to bring it up one more, so that the AI is playing by the same rules as me. That's another thing that I just have a problem with, is if the AI is not playing by the same rules as me. So I've got that set. The battle planner. This is a setting that allows you, when a battle takes place, to pause and pick the tactics to fight with the battle. And that's a neat thing. It's not for me, because I see myself, when I play this game, as the chief executive. I'm Lincoln. Lincoln is not picking the battle tactics for the general on the field. I want the general to pick those. Activation rule. I use the veteran option. What that does, it does not tell you whether your commanders are going to be active or not during the orders phase. In fact, they'll all appear to you to be active, and you input your orders, and then it will go, after you're resolving the turn, it will do the roll to determine whether the individual generals are active or not. I really like this. It makes coordination between the different leaders more difficult, as it should be, and it decreases the flexibility of the player. I believe that in historical war games, the player has much more flexibility than was historically the case, and I think that leads to a higher pace of operations. So things are very rushed in games, in historical war games, for the most part, far more so than was the case. So anything that decreases my flexibility or hides information from me, makes it harder for me to optimize things, I'm a big fan of. So I'm going to keep that on the veteran option. Randomized generals. the stats that the generals start with are just fine as set by the designers. I think the non A level A list generals kind of get a little cookie cutter. They appear to have a lot of guys with the same stats. I like to put a small randomization to it. I think that still stays within a historically plausible situation, because I think that these stats do have a certain degree of subjectiveness to them. You can certainly make a case for having different stats for any individual general. That said, I wouldn't want to have a large randomization in it, that you could end up with McClellan being an awesome general and Lee being a schlub. You know, that really would take me out of the historical feel that I'm looking for when I play the game. But I think a small randomization I think is really good. So I'm going to keep it at that. The naval boxes handling. This is how the blockade is handled. How much micromanagement you want to put into the blockade. And at the higher levels here, there's almost no micromanagement, but the effectiveness of the blockade is much lower. So there's a trade-off there. And you can bring that down to the different levels. I'm just going to have that completely turned off so that I'm going to use the normal rules for that. The extended force pools. This gives you the option to increase the amount of troops available to you up to 200%. And I think this is just completely fantasy, so this is not for me. I'm going to keep that off. Easy supply. I think it's a good thing to use easy supply when you're learning how to play the game. Gives you one less thing to worry about. But for my purposes, I want that off. I want the supply situation to really dominate my thinking and planning to a large degree. And the advanced supply rules combined with the historical attrition and this activation rule, these are what's going to give me the rule set that gives me the situation that I'm looking for. Traffic penalty. This is a new option that's being developed. I'm using the 1.05 release candidate available on the AGEOD's forum for this. And this is something that's still in development. The intent of this is to provide cohesion hits when you're moving too much force through a single region, like you're overloading the road network and your troops get all disorganized as a result. I've messed with it. It's not really giving me a result that I'm happy with, so I'm just going to leave this off. Although I do see this as being something that does sound like it's going to be appealing to me down the road once they get it balanced. The AI settings. I'm going to keep the AI settings at the default, which gives no advantages to the player or to the AI. I like the AI to follow the same rules as the player. Use all behaviors, certainly. Normally, I've always played this with the activation bonus of 1, and they actually do suggest when playing against the AI to give them a +1 on the activation roll. I'm going to play this with no bonus for the AI. It ties in both with my desire to have the same rule set as the AI, and also I'm going to try to, with my play style, avoid taking undue advantage of the AI, so I don't think I need to give them quite as much advantage as might otherwise be the case. That said, we can always come back in here and change these options if things aren't going quite as expected. I do, however, have no problem giving them a detect bonus. This will let the AI have a little better picture of my troops than I have of his, and I don't really have a problem with that if that helps the decision making of the AI a little bit. The aggressiveness. This is a setting that I go back and forth on this. The AI, I've only played this as the North against the South, and again I think I've played this about a dozen times through the first 6 months of the war, and that's basically all I've done. But the AI does have a tendency to have these kamikaze missions. Well, they'll take a portion of the southern force and drive them behind enemy lines, and it can get a little easy to cut them off and wipe them out, and it seems a little reckless. So I've experimented with taking this back down to the low aggressiveness, but that seems to be a little bit overkill in the other direction. So I'm going to leave that on the normal aggressiveness, and I'm going to see if, combined with taking that activation bonus away, might might take away a bit of this kamikaze tendency that the AI has. System settings, that's all normal. Okay. Okay, the two most important concepts in this game, in my opinion, is the command system and the supply system. You really have to have a good understanding of how those work in order to use your troops effectively. The first thing we're going to look at is the command system. It's not difficult, but it can be overlooked. It's pretty simple. Basically, leaders, your generals, provide command points. And your combat forces, your artillery, your infantry, and your cavalry units require a certain number of command points in order to operate at their full effectiveness. Generals will provide 4 command points for each star of their rank. That's a good shorthand for remembering how to do it. So a brigadier general has 4, a major general will provide 8, and a lieutenant general or higher is going to provide 12. And that maxes out at 16. So regardless of how many generals you'll have in your stack, you're still only going to have 16 points to work with. If you hover over the combat units, it will tell you the command cost of each one. So for instance, this artillery battery only has a command cost of 1, and that's what you'll see over here. You'll see these 16 in parentheses. That's the command points that are available in the stack. And the 1 on the outside here, that's how many are required to operate this unit at full effectiveness. Now something that can be a little difficult to get your head around initially is that when you start this scenario, this is the Union Army that is preparing to move on Manassas, and it has this Northeastern Virginia Army stack, and here's the 1st Division and the 2nd Division and the 3rd Division and the 4th Division and the 5th Division. Well, these historically were the divisions in the Army, but for game purposes these are not divisions. They're not even in this Army. The only unit that's in this Army, the Army of Northeastern Virginia, is this single artillery battery. These are individual independent stacks that are completely unaffiliated with this Army. So if we look at one of these units, let's grab the 1st Division, which is Tyler's command, and look off to the side here. We see we have 14 command points required, 2 command points are provided, and we have a 35% penalty. And anything that gives you a penalty you'll see in red, so that it'll draw attention that, yeah, something's not right here. The first thing that comes to mind is, well, why is this only 2? I thought we have a brigadier general here. He should give us 4 points here. Why is that only 2? Well, every independent stack, if you're in an independent stack, not part of an army, your command points are halved. So Tyler provides 4 command points because he's a brigadier general, but then it's halved because he's an independent. So that encourages you to concentrate your forces in armies in order to optimize your command points. Divisions, what we're going to be able to do this initially. The armies at this time just did not have the experience or the capability or the administrative ability to effectively command these large forces that were coming in. Their experience from the Mexican War was much smaller forces. There was nothing larger than a brigade in the American Army at that time, and there was not felt to be any need for anything larger. So you have all of these huge forces now starting to be amassed, and you have a military structure that's completely incapable of handling that number of troops. So this is what we're going to see early on in the game, is we're going to see some large command penalties here. Now what we're going to be able to do late fall, I believe about October of 1861, is we're going to be able to form divisions. And what that's going to let us do is take a single general and combine him with several combat units and we'll be able to combine this so that this button here will become available, and we'll be able to combine these into a single stack that costs only 4 command points to operate effectively. So we'll have what is currently 14 command points worth of units is going to be able to be operated by only 4. So that's as the military structure starts to develop the ability to command these large forces, we're gonna be able to be more efficient in our command point usage. So what we have here at the beginning, though, is this. Now 35% is as bad as it gets. If you have no leaders and 100,000 troops, you're still going to have a 35% command penalty. So there's really no downside to putting all these guys into this one stack, and that's what we're going to do here in a little bit. Something to keep in mind is, let's find somebody, 10 here. This halving of the command points happens after we max out at 16. So if we take, say, these 2 brigadier generals, and we'll stick them in here, and we'll grab Miles out of here, you would think 2, 4, 6, 8, or each of these that okay, we have 8. That's what we would expect. 16. Now we think, okay, let's grab another one. Heinzelman, let's stick him in there, and we're going to have 10. Well, no, we only have 8 here because that half, dividing their strength in half, occurs after we hit that maximum of 16. So additional troops or additional generals aren't going to help you at all in an independent stack. You're never going to get higher than 8 with an independent stack, and that's going to really curtail how much force you can actually have in a stack that's independent if you want to keep them at full strength. So this really can only command 8. So let's pull these guys out. So so now we have no command penalty. We have 8 needed and 8 provided. 4 brigadier generals and 2 brigades. This is what we're looking at if you want to command a independent unit without having a command penalty. So you can see this is an extremely inefficient use of your leadership, and leaders are quite dear until you get a massive increase in your number of leaders in January of 1862. So you just really can't afford to be, sticking 4 generals in charge of these 2 brigades. So what we're going to do with this force is we're going to stack all the units that nominally are part of this army, and we're going to make them effectively part of this army. Now it's not just that they are now actually part of this army, and we'll see that we still have this 35% penalty to our power. So if we see this 1221 is his power. If we did not have this 35% penalty, this would be 35% higher or so. So we'd be sitting here at 1500 or better on this guy. Quite a lot better than that, I think. But what this will allow us to do with this army is we're going to take this full army, send him down to Manassas, and we'll know that all of these units are going to engage at the same time. So they're not going to be trickling in, or some of them fail to engage. All of them are going to come in at the same time because they're in this army all together. We have our 35% penalty, and we're going to accept that because that's pretty much the best we can do at this point. Now if we hover over Beauregard here, we can see that he's in similar straits. Not quite as bad as we are, but he's still pretty bad. He does have 27 required for his command, and he has provided 18. So he's got a couple bonuses coming from somewhere. He's only at a 33% penalty, but the difference between a 33 and a 35% penalty is pretty meaningless. So we're pretty much operating at the same penalty. So we're going to go ahead and take McDowell here, put him on an offensive posture. These are the different postures you set your units at. You can go for assault, offensive, defensive, or passive. The only difference between assault and offensive is that assault will they will assault fortifications, whereas just a normal offense won't. An assault is no better in a field battle than just a regular offensive. It just refers to what it's going to do if it happens to find itself in a region with a entrenched or fortified unit in a town or a fortification of some type. Below that, we have, you can kind of customize it a little bit. You can have an all-out assault, which means he will take more losses before he retreats, or you can have just the normal, or you can have kind of a conservative assault. You're not really sure if you want to, push it or not. So this will allow him to break off the attack sooner, and then you have feint or probe, which allows you to break it off even sooner. And something like that might be if you want to either gather intelligence on what actually is in that region, or if you want to pin him in place, but you don't want to take too much losses doing it. So we may say we had a situation where we wanted to put most of our combat into this thing right here, but we didn't want Johnson or Beauregard to come reinforce that. We could put a force on here, attack him with a feint attack, and that might slow him up while he's fighting us, and so he doesn't get down to here to reinforce whatever else we're doing. So that's something that we could do. So anyway, we're going to take McDowell, and we're going to put him in Manassas. Now, our 2020 hindsight would tell us that maybe this is not the best idea. That didn't really work out terribly well. These forces are very evenly matched, and so under normal circumstances I wouldn't do this. I would consider this way too risky to try such a thing. But I think, going back to my my play style, where I like to put myself in the shoes of the folks at the time, there was tremendous pressure for McDowell to advance to Manassas at this point, and there was really no way that he was not going to do this. It wasn't going to happen. So I'm going to have him do this. He's going to attack into Manassas. Okay, what's next here? I think we'll talk about supply next. I'm going to cut this piece, and I'm going to talk about supply, and I'll stick that together. Alrighty.